the only way you ever figure out win for all solutions is like it's loyalty to an outcome, not processes. Processes are important. I'm not saying screw all the processes we have in place, right? We need process, we need order, we need structure, we need protocols. But sometimes we have to not follow process.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
I 100% am going to talk about World War I and World War II today because I haven't had like a legitimate World War II conversation in quite some time. So we're going to do that today. So World War I, for those of you who would like the refresher, the reason that happened is we had all these entangling alliances between a ton of different nation states during the time. And then Franz Duke, what was his name? Ferdinand, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, there we go, of Austria. He got assassinated by, man, what was that? It was like a teenager. He belonged to like a I don't know if they would call him a terrorist group or a political group, but it was called the Black Hand. Name is not Giuseppe in there somewhere, maybe. I don't know. Name's not coming to me at the moment. Anyway, Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets assassinated. One country wages war on another, and because of all these entangling alliances, poof, World War I happens. It is just one of the most like brutal global conflicts of all time, because this is like when you have an introduction of a lot of the like killing machines that we equate with warfare today. The interesting thing about the World Wars, though, is like, okay, entangling alliances, guy gets assassinated, World War I. When you talk about World War II, most people are like Adolf Hitler. Like, that's why World War II happened, right? Which he most certainly had a role to play in why World War II happened. But if you want to look at why World War II really happened, the reason World War II really happened is because of the way World War I ended, right? So when the Allies all got together and they were like, we're awesome, we kicked the German Empire's butt along with some of their allies, we're so great, we're going to create this Treaty of Versailles, or Versailles if you live in Indiana. And essentially what this treaty was, it was like a win-lose, right? And if you actually fast forward in history, it ends up being a lose-lose. But it was this win-lose situation, and what the Allies essentially did is they imposed all these like brutally harsh penalties against the German Empire. They essentially created an economic environment that brought on substantial debt to the empire. They took away a lot of their territories, including Alsace-Lorraine, which is a very fertile, right, rich soil area. And then I think with that came this like crippling humiliation of defeat. But it was very much like we win, you lose. And that loss was exacerbated over time. And a lot of historians they wouldn't even argue anymore. They would say it's a fact. It created like the perfect breeding grounds for someone like an Adolf Hitler to come in and have just a very intense ideology to get people's buy-in, right? And so it's kind of terrifying, because if the Allies after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, didn't pursue like a win, like because they didn't go for like a win for all solution, like how do we give this country like, yeah, they lost a war, but they're still very much important players in like how global commerce works. Because they didn't go that route, the treaty, created the very conditions that led to World War II. So it was like a short-term win became a long-term disaster, right? The same thing happens, I think, in leadership, right? That's at our scale. If we settle for win-lose, if we take like the win-lose, someone's got to lose, right? In order for someone to win, we might get through the day. We might get through today. We survive today. We win today. But I think ultimately what ends up happening when we do that is the same thing that happened after World War I in Germany, which is you plant these seeds of resentment. If we're talking about our people, right, that work in our organization, it's it's disengagement, right? That's usually how it always starts, is this like loss of connection to the mission, to the vision, to the values. It's disengagement. And it just leads to bigger problems down the road. Commitment number 4 is it's creating win for all solutions. Last time I spoke, when we talked about sufficiency, the law of abundance versus the law of scarcity, the idea of creating win for all solutions is really like predicated on that analogy I brought up about a pie, right? It's like it's not slices of a pie, right? It's like you don't get this slice and therefore I don't get that slice. That's not how winning for all in this organization works. And I think one of the most painful, because what do we preach, right? We preach like decisions, like if the individual, right, if the field professional wins and the customer wins and the company wins, that's a win for all solution, right? That is like the trifecta of winning. And I think like one of the most painful experiences I've had as a leader is like, I'll never forget, we have a plumber who he's been with us for years, and he made a sale, right? We shouldn't shy away from saying that. He provided options to a customer, and they found a solution that they wanted, and it included some really nice toilets. Toilets are always one of those things for me, side note, that I just feel like, I mean, unless I'm in Asia and they have the ones that have the bidet and the music and the lights and all that, it's like a toilet is a toilet is a toilet. But apparently there are very expensive, nice toilets out there. Who knew? I didn't. I'm from Acton. Toilet's a toilet. But anyway, part of this package, it's probably like a $15,000 ticket without a repipe, which is actually kind of it's a pretty big deal, right? And not a tankless either. So he didn't sell a tankless, and it wasn't a repipe. And it's still like a $15,000 ticket because of these like toilets. And some things happened. We were obviously procuring those from here. They were special. We didn't get it done in time. There was another miscommunication. I was looking at Jake, but we've already talked about this, and it was almost a year ago. Okay. So it's like, no, I have moved on, but I use it simply to reinforce the story, where it was like in that moment, Justin won, right? Like he provided options to a customer. He got a customer taken care of, right? It's like, I think it's like one of the most painful things when a salesperson goes to a customer's house and they spend all this time with them, and they even get the customer to say yes, and then they want to leverage it through finance, and then they're credit debt and they can't make the sale. And it's like, man, what a painful experience. But in this case, like Justin makes the sale. We need to get these people their toilets. We don't get them to him the next day. He calls in. He's willing to drive in. There's just miscommunication. Customer gets disgruntled, and then customer has someone else do it because they end up having this party that's happening, and that's why they wanted to do the toilet upgrade. Which is an interesting thing, right? It's like you're having appetizers and you're waiting for them to come out. I'm like, wow, may I say your toilets are absolute. Wow, did you get new toilets? But like, it's a disappointing thing because it's like, the company, we don't win, right? We didn't collect any revenue. If anything, we wasted revenue just getting resources aligned to try to coordinate the fulfillment of this job. The customer, that's interesting. I guess the customer does win. They don't win with us, but they got what they wanted, right? So they win in their opinion. They don't care about, they just want their new toilets. They don't care about the, or maybe they do. Maybe they lost. Maybe they had someone that doesn't offer the same sort of warranty or protection or things like that, and maybe they're losing right now because they had to go with a different option that couldn't fulfill it the way that we could. But I'll tell you who loses the most is Justin. Justin loses because he spent however many hours on that job, right, getting a customer to yes. And then it ends up being a no. So then when you go back and look at that call, it's a closed loss opportunity for Justin, right? He didn't convert. So his conversion suffers. His average ticket, so we went back and marked it as a non-op because it wasn't his fault. But bear with me. His conversion suffers, his average ticket suffers, but ultimately the opportunity cost is he could have been on another job selling something else that does get installed, right? So it's like win for all. Like what does that mean and what does that look like? It's when we go beyond, I think, compromise, and I think sometimes it means we go beyond protocol or process. I know. Whoa, we go beyond process. What? This man's crazy. Yeah, because like the reality is like the only way you ever figure out win for all solutions is like it's loyalty to an outcome. And that day, the outcome was get the damn toilets to Justin and let Justin install the toilets and take care of the customer. Now, the process might have said something different. Fine. But it's loyalty to outcomes, not processes. Processes are important. I'm not saying screw all the processes we have in place, right? We need process. We need order. We need structure. We need protocols. But sometimes we have to not follow the process to get the outcomes that we want. And I would argue that if we have to not follow the process to get the outcomes that we want, there's probably something flawed or broken in that process. Or maybe it's a process that we constructed for an organization that does tens of millions of dollars in Indianapolis that isn't applicable to a branch that's just trying to see $1 million for the year. And we're making a process here and doing a one size fits all for over there. I mean, think about that. Think about your role in this organization. It's like, how often, I mean, we're all in Indianapolis, right? How often do we make decisions or follow processes because it makes our lives easier? We get to win here because this is where shared resources sit. This is where, this is HQ. Like we make all the decisions. I think a win for all goes beyond compromise. We find creative solutions where, again, customers, our team members, and our company all benefit from that. I think my favorite part about this chapter was like, okay, how do you create win for all solutions? And they're like, it must be the end of the book because then they just review all the other chapters you went over. So this is great. The way that they say you get win for all solutions is 4 things that you need to do. Number 1 is you have to use Candor. I think Chad had to talk about Candor, which really excited me that he had to do that one. Like without Candor, they're either going to do one of 2 things. They're going to hide their problems or they're going to sugarcoat them. Neither of those get us anywhere, right? If you don't have Candor, it's like false agreements, right? It's like when we talked about ruinous empathy, right? It's like, I can care about you, but if I don't give you the direct feedback, then it's ruinous empathy, right? Candor comes first, telling the truth, being transparent, making sure that the facts are on the table, they're visible and accessible to everybody. Number 2 was awesome for me because it's what we talked about 2 weeks ago. It's the sufficiency, it's the abundance mindset, right? So you got to use Candor. And then if you don't have an abundance mindset, you have a scarcity mindset. If you have a scarcity mindset, that means if you win, I lose. That's a scarcity mindset. Well, it can't be a win for all situation if somebody's already losing. So scarcity, right? It breeds competition. It breeds negativity. It breeds blame culture. It breeds loss, right? So Candor, sufficiency, right? Abundance says there's enough work, there's enough credit, there's enough calls, there's enough opportunity for all. Now, sometimes we could use more calls. I just will point that out. But there's enough, right? There's enough. There is enough. Sufficiency says, how do we make sure that everyone has the opportunity, customers get solutions, and the company grows? That's the law of abundance, right? Last week, Chad talked about support through allyship, through allies, through our teammates. So you got to have Candor. You got to adopt the abundance mindset or the law of abundance. And then you got to have allies. Like no creative solution is ever going to be created in isolation. No man is an island, right? And I think leaders as allies have to co-create what those solutions look like, right? No one is going to do, like, there are just way too many important interdependent departments in this organization that mean no one is going to experience success on their own, right? And then the last one is, I think, one of our earlier ones out of this book, which is curiosity. So you got to tell the truth. You got to have an abundance mindset. You got to, respect and promote allyship, promote teamliness, promote working together, collaboration, cooperation. And then ultimately the last piece is you gotta practice curiosity. What else could work? Right? I think one of the best things about curiosity is like you assume the best. Not, wow, that guy's an idiot. Wow, why did he come? Why did he say that? Why does he think that? Wow, why is like, I wonder what must be true that's leading this person to believe that this is the best solution. Let me go find out by asking questions and not calling you an idiot, right? Because we all love that, right? It's like the exasperative, like you leave the room and you're like, gosh, can't believe what they said, right? As opposed to like, we're just curious, just ask the questions. Just like, I think that's where a lot of false agreement gets to, right? It's like, we don't ask the question, therefore we're not informed, and therefore we just jump to a conclusion that either isn't a win for all solution or it's just a compromise that gives us like a half-baked result. It was interesting. So wait, candor, sufficiency, support through allies, and curiosity is how we create win for all solutions. I kind of thought about it like a recipe. I don't know. That's I don't know. It's just what came to my mind when I was showering this morning. That's when like there's one of the people that I manage, which there's a handful of them, but he told me now I've limited it even more. He said that when he does his shower, I do a lot of thinking in the shower. But he does his thinking out loud, so he'll actually talk, which I find wildly entertaining. I tried it, not for me, but I thought it was like really, really interesting to do like a think aloud. I used to do that with students, like a metacognitive approach. Like let me say out loud how I'm processing this in my brain. Except he's doing it by himself in the shower, which I think is hysterical. But my shower thought this morning was, this is like a recipe. So like you need candor, right? Because like candor is like your ingredients, right? If you don't have your ingredients on the table, you're not gonna win the Great British Bake Off or whatever that show is called. The sufficiency piece is the idea that there's enough of the ingredients to go around. Candor is the ingredients. It's the truth, right? There's the ingredients on the table. It's candor. Sufficiency is there's enough of this recipe. There's enough of these ingredients to go around. Support, well, that's your allies in the kitchen, right? Your people helping you. I would argue sometimes I'd prefer less people in the kitchen, but for the sake of this analogy that I'm building, somebody is doing something to support me in the kitchen. One of the things I found the most supportive is if you ever cook salmon, which I will treat myself every once in a while too. It's annoying when you gotta like, I like to put like to spice it up and treat it. Well, you put the olive oil on there to get your base that you're gonna stick all that nice flavor onto. But then when you need to actually apply the salt and the pepper and the garlic and all these things, I end up washing my hands like 4 times just to do that. So it's nice if you have somebody that can apply your spices, right, and your salt and all that stuff. I see a couple heads shaking, so I'm like, all right, maybe steak also, same thing. Yeah, it's your chicken. Like, really, your protein, I guess. The point is like sometimes it's nice to have an extra set of hands in the kitchen, right? A sous chef, if you will, someone that's going to dice up the veggies. Curiosity, I thought of as like the willingness to try something new, right? The willingness to try a new recipe, the willingness to be creative, a little ratatouille in the kitchen, if you will, to maybe try something new. And then I think ultimately, like, we all win because we create a dish that we can all enjoy together, right? So I thought of like candor as the ingredients, sufficiency as the belief there's enough, support as in help in the kitchen, your allies, the curiosity to try something new, and then together we all win. I think that like winning is fun, right? Like I was thinking about like what are we going to talk like how are we going to talk about win for all? It's fun, and I think like in a sporting event, it's not a surprise. Right, it's like why one team wins. Sometimes it's like a play happened that was like, holy crap, like that was the better team, but then this happened, fine. But in sports, it's like pretty straightforward, right? It's like usually the team that executes on the field, whether it was through the execution of the players, the coaching, all the intangibles, all these things come together and they produce this result. I think in a business, it's a lot harder. Like it's not as clearly defined. I think sometimes we might see success and it's like a surprise. Right. I think like it was probably when we first started doing this at the beginning of the year of 2025, I talked about how bad of a year revenue wise 2024 was for us. Right. And if that was a surprise to you as a leader, I would say then we have to do a better job of ensuring that everyone in this organization understands, not to the minute detail, but understands, I think, relatively speaking, where we're at as a company. Right. And I think the last 6 months have been fun because we've been winning better. Because I don't view 2024 as a loss because I think we learned a ton of things in 2024 that have paved the way for 25. Right? There's a that's curiosity. That's a willingness to own mistakes. That's a willingness and a commitment to get better. But I think ultimately, like winning, like a win for all is not a miracle. It doesn't just like happen. Right? I think it's the result of us as leaders putting all these things together, and creating the very environment, right, that allows for success, that allows for people to win, because winning's fun. And you know who wants to win the most? Field professionals. And if you're someone who doesn't manage someone who's in the field, just know that you are a part of an integral department, right? That is interdependently aligned on their success. Because the reality is if they're not successful in the field, none of you exist in this room. You exist, don't get me wrong, just not in this room. You're not a member of this organization. Because I think that what we've been doing for a while now, and it's time to stop, is I think that we've been creating processes and making protocols and doing things that make our lives easier. We get to win. And I think it's at the expense of others. Think about that. Anytime we do anything that makes our lives easier, ask yourself, does this make the life of a field professional who sometimes is working from 6:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night on a 12-hour day, who has to go into a stranger's home when the rest of the world is terrified when someone knocks on their door? These are people that go and knock on doors for a living. Whether it's to generate revenue or to fulfill it, they're going into strangers' homes, and the reality is like they want to win too. And if they don't win, then they're not happy. And if they're not happy, then they lose. And if they lose, they leave. And if they leave, the customer doesn't win, we don't win, you don't win. And like the harsh reality is that we are in a skilled labor, sure, you can call it a shortfall, you can call it a problem. I mean, I would call it a crisis. AI is not going to put in the furnace. AI is not going to do the repipe. AI is not going to swap out the flame sensor. And I always use flame sensor because I know what the flame sensor is, all right? AI is not going to do all those things. And so I think as a company, as like we are all administrative employees, like some of us still do the work, Thank you to the gentleman in the front. Some of us still do an occasional install, still do an occasional thing, still go into the field. We have hybridized roles where we have leaders who still go out and train and still get some calluses on their hands. They're just as important too. And the reality is, if they don't feel like they're winning, then we're going to lose. So a win for all solution is not, how do I make my life shitty so they win? Because, well, then your life's shitty and then you're going to quit, and then that's not winning, right? A win for all solution is how do we build processes? How do we build protocols? How do we build norms, business norms, operational norms, ways of doing things to ensure that you can operate more efficiently, right? So that we can win in the field. But your winning might be like maybe a shade of gray less. And I think that's okay, because ultimately, like, the philosophy we should adopt, and it's what we talked about when I had a much bigger involvement with L&D, is like their failures are yours, right? The field's failures are yours. They're yours. They're yours. The failures in the field are our failures. We own those failures. It's not their fault. I've told them 20 times, though, when they put in the blow. Nope. It's your fault. You didn't coach it right. You didn't teach it right. You didn't hold them accountable. You didn't go do it with them. Doesn't matter how many damn times you told them. It's your fault. They failed because of you. Their failures are ours. And I think if we don't get to a place where we can adopt that philosophy, then ultimately customers will lose and the company will lose. Their failures are yours. And here's the most important part that some of us have been missing, because I've seen it in our Teams chats. Their successes are theirs. Their successes are theirs. They're not yours. You don't get to talk, except for the fact of you acknowledging their successes. If it's someone else acknowledging their successes, you don't get to say a word. You just get to say, great job, thumbs up, pat on the back, keep it up. And I think that's the hardest part about being a leader, is we don't get the glory anymore. They do. They get to win. The successes are theirs. They're the winners. And it doesn't just have to be someone in the field. It can be people administratively. It can be people that serve, again, very important roles in this organization. But I want us to not lose sight of the fact that what keeps the lights on, runs the camera, and allows us to have an expensive 30-minute meeting, right, is skilled laborers that go into a stranger's home and provide options that they're detached from. So I think about that as you go throughout your day. It's like, am I making decisions? Am I doing things that are going to create a win for all solution? Is everyone going to win? Is the field professional? Is my direct report? Is the company? Is the customer? Is everybody going to win? And the really, 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 really harsh truth might be that sometimes this group of leaders, sometimes to a degree, we'll lose. And that's the price of being a leader. Is sometimes the compromise is our own sacrifice to ensure the success of others. Thanks so much for all you guys do. It's a tough freaking job. But again, I would argue it's a lot tougher going into a stranger's home, right? And presenting solutions. Don't lose sight of that. Don't lose sight of like what we're here to do. We're here to build stronger, better, healthier communities, but we're also here to employ people, to provide them a life trajectory, not just a career trajectory, a life trajectory.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.